Hello, this is Dr. Brian McDonough, and welcome to the Dr. Brian McDonough Show. I have a special guest today, Mark Malkoff. Now, Mark Malkoff has been a guest of mine before. We talked about his book, Love Johnny Carson. Today, we're going to talk about his executive producer, that is, Johnny Carson's executive producer, Peter Lassally. It's a very interesting story, something I wanted to follow up on, and Mark was kind enough to join me today. We welcome you to the program, Mark. Thanks for being here.
Oh, it's good to see you again. Thanks for having me back.
I wanted to talk about Peter Lassally, and
Yeah.
again, you to give a little background in writing your book, you did over 400 interviews plus interviews after your podcast. But your podcast, which is still out there and people can listen to if they want, was done over, I guess, what, an 8-year period or so?
That's right, 8 years,
And you
roughly.
interviewed so many people, and I thought what was great about it was, in doing so, you were kind of chronicling Johnny Carson's life and talked to people, especially his life as the host of the Tonight Show. Um, and you really did a good job, I think, in getting a lot of people. I mean, the
Oh,
person who
thank you.
opened the curtains, who would bring him aboard, guests, others. And overall, real quick, after that experience, a lot of energy and a lot of time. Was it worthwhile?
It was for me, and I just had no idea that people all over the country missed Johnny as much as me and had the same curiosity questions. I mean, this is a guy who was the most famous man in America. And what went on backstage behind the scenes? That was what I wanted to know. And I had no idea that so many people would talk to me. I mean, it was one of those things that they revered this man so much. I probably talked to maybe 60 staff members that worked for Carson behind the scenes, all his writers, at least 10 of his writers. And yeah, I got my questions answered. It was this journey for 8 years. Everyone from Mel Brooks on Johnny's very first show to his personal assistants to his friends.
And one of the people that you interviewed, and I remember you saying it distinctly that it was one of the highlights of the interviews you really
Yeah,
wanted to talk to was a gentleman named Peter Lassally,
yeah,
who was his executive producer. His name, I learned more about him, was the host whisperer.
that's
He
right.
he had a long career. Tell me first, you tell me a little bit about his career and his background, even before he got to Carson.
Peter was an NBC page. He was friends with Regis, who was also a page. Regis Philbin. They were friends, lifelong friends. Peter worked with Mike Wallace before 60 Minutes. He worked with everybody from Arthyr Godfrey to Johnny Carson to David Letterman, Tom Snyder, Craig Ferguson. And he was one of those people that talk show hosts, they wanted his counsel. Other than Tom Snyder, that was a thing we can talk about. That was an unpleasant situation, but everybody really deferred to Peter. I mean, Johnny would say, Carson, I'm not good with the guest. If Peter said this person was is good or we shouldn't have this person on, Johnny would listen to Peter, and he really had a talent for the hosts. And James Corden, they asked him to stay for the Late Late Show after Craig Ferguson ended to be a consultant, and Peter said, I've done my time. I think he was in his early 80s by then. But yeah, I mean, just everybody, all the late night hosts look at him as just this kind of Jedi guru. Just a really, really nice man.
What I found really interesting about him during Carson's time was,
Yeah.
even before I started listening to your podcast and reading your book and talking to you, I knew the name Fred de Cordova because it came up a lot in
Yeah,
Carson shows. Growing up watching
sure.
Carson, that name came up, and it was really interesting that LaSalle actually was pulling the strings and doing quite a bit, but didn't want anybody to know. He just kind of was just happy to do the work, which always impresses me. I think he didn't want the glory. He just wanted to get the job done.
Peter wasn't one that would go to all the dressing rooms and take photos with Hollywood stars. Fred was a schmoozer. He was really, really good at it. He knew how to handle Johnny and famous people. And they had an arrangement where Peter would do all the work and Fred would be the schmoozer, and they were good with it. I mean, they would have lunch every day at the NBC commissary. They were friends. And, Peter started, I think, a week or two after the Tiny Tim wedding, which that was December of 1969. And yeah, he was with Johnny through the end of the Tonight Show, and then became friends with him. They were work colleagues, and then they became legit friends. And Peter's the one that encouraged Johnny the last year of his life to send in jokes to David Letterman, and Letterman was secretly doing them on his show, but that was Peter's suggestion.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I remember you saying that Letterman, when he would do it, sometimes would do the golf swing as an inside joke to Carson, which is kind of cool. I wanted to talk about Lassally also because of his background. He did not have a great childhood, to say the least. He was born in Germany prior to Nazi occupation, and I think they went to the Netherlands. And then he and his family actually were taken to concentration camps.
Yeah, he went to school with Anne Frank, and when he came over here to the United States, to my knowledge, I don't believe he spoke any English. It's the success story is really unbelievable. He had lots of tragedy, but when you spent time with him, and I was lucky I did, you really couldn't get much of a sense to that. I mean, his most important thing was not the career successes. It was his family. It was his kids, his wife, Alice. I was fortunate that, I did interview him twice for the podcast, but, he would have me into his home in Beverly Hills. I'd go to the CBS Television City and sit in his office with Craig Ferguson, and he just took me in. I felt very blessed to get to know him. And, he would tell me stories. The first time I even met him, he's like, Mark, some of these stories are just for you. When we're recording, just don't get me in trouble. Edit out stuff so I don't get in trouble. So for whatever reason, he trusted me right away, and it was a pleasure and a complete honor to be friends with him.
What's interesting also was his leadership skills, which is why I wanted to talk to you. I actually saw on YouTube, because you can find just about anything on YouTube, but it was an old CBS Sunday Morning. Later in his life, they interviewed him, and he was talking about his experiences in the concentration camps and the horrific things he saw. And they showed him a picture of him as a little boy, and he says, "What do you see in that photo?" And it was something to the effect of, "I see innocence, and I see bright eyes," and almost as if he lost that innocence at such a young age.
I can't even imagine what he went through. He was not a fan of doing interviews, but CBS on Sundays was his favorite show. I mean, we would talk about it. So when Mo Rocca, who I'm friendly with, wanted to do something, Peter felt, he wanted to do it just because he was such a fan of the show. So I know Peter was very happy with the piece. So I'm glad that that's documented. But yeah, for Peter just to kind of look back on that part of his life, I didn't get the sense that he would go back and really think about that time very much. I feel like from talking to him, he was very much about his kids, his wife, just being in the present, and just mentoring really nice people. I mean, the loyalty that people had. When I would go over to CBS Television City, I remember one time he purposely had me in to come in when Jay Leno's producer, Debbie Vickers, was going to be there so I could spend time with Debbie and Peter. And Debbie, worked for Johnny Carson as well. So that's who Peter was. Just like I'm a nobody, and he would have me into his home. We went out for lunch, and I'm just really glad that he was able to enjoy, his retirement. He really did pay his dues. I mean, I can't think of anybody in that form of late night that worked for so many hosts. And he was a straight shooter. I mean, when he was sent to California to talk to Tom Snyder, David Letterman was producing the Late Late Show and telling Tom he needed to step up his game, and Snyder tried to get Peter fired. Peter just knew sometimes he had to deliver the bad news, and that was part of the job.
Yeah, I think, you mentioned about Snyder. I think he and Snyder, even when he referred to him, he tried to be polite, but it clearly was a different relationship. He knew he didn't get through to him. Wasn't able to. With Johnny Carson, he obviously, I get the impression Carson was a professional and a taskmaster, and he wanted things to be perfect. I would think that would be a tough gentleman to work with on a daily basis, because it would be high pressure.
Peter told me, surprisingly, the day that Johnny was not difficult at all. And that was the people I talked to. That was almost all consistent of the people at the Tonight Show. They said he was not hard, and Peter emphasized to me more than once that he was the most normal out of all the late night hosts that he knew. Definitely the most well-read. But yeah, he was Johnny definitely expected excellence, and I think everybody there just wanted to do the best possible. And same with I think at Letterman, I had a day job there for about a year, and everybody over there the same thing. And yeah, Peter demanded excellence, and Johnny really would just listen to Peter. Peter at one point was like, "We need to stop booking Rich Little. He does the same thing every appearance." And Johnny listened to Peter and said, "You know best." And a lot of hosts are not like that. They micromanage, but Johnny knew that Peter had strengths. And yeah, Rich Little then just didn't do the show anymore. Peter, when Rich Little guest hosted the Tonight Show, Peter got to the point where he refused to come into work for artistic principles merit. So yeah, he wouldn't go in when Rich Little was guest hosting. But finally, Johnny said, "Okay, whatever you want to do."
Wow, and it's interesting. I think when you interviewed Rich Little,
Yeah.
he kind of wasn't sure what happened to him. Like a lot of people,
Yeah.
it seems like a lot of guests on the Tonight Show, like they would disappear, but they wouldn't know why they weren't asked.
That's right.
Back.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, with Rich Little's case, I made the point to Peter. I said the audience loved Rich Little. Whenever he would do it, the audience loved him. He said yes, but it's the same impressions every single time. It's the same thing. And Peter's just like, it got old. And yeah, that was it. And he was never. But it was. You're absolutely right. There are people that wonder probably to this day, why wasn't I asked back? And we go into that in the book with certain people. I mean, there was just an etiquette when you were over there. David Letterman said he was always terrified when he was over there that he was going to do a faux pas and not get asked back. Johnny expected when you were over there, you're in somebody's home to just have certain manners, like you're at a cocktail party. And Letterman was the same when guests would do his show as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The one that, again, you laid it out perfectly, but I'd be curious what Lassally thought of Rodney Dangerfield, who literally had his jokes, and then he had another set of jokes when he would sit down on the panel. Did Lassally appreciate that about the work that because it seemed like it was a tremendous amount of work he put into those appearances?
Peter appreciated excellence. He wanted people on the Tonight Show that were the best in the world. If you're an opera singer, if you're country music, if you're doing sleight of hand magic, if you are excellent at what you do and you are the very, very top, and especially if you have some originality, he wants you there. And Dangerfield, what he was doing, no one else was doing. And the fact that he was such a powerhouse that he could do 25 jokes, which every comedian did at the Curtain, do stand up, and then sit down with Johnny and do 25 new jokes. I mean, I think it was something like 80 appearances, and America would just, go through their TV listings and TV guides. And if Dangerfield was going to be on, there were so many people that would tune in just for Dangerfield. But when he was on, when Don Rickles was on, it was an event.
Yeah, Rickles was another one. One of the things you talked about, and I was curious, maybe DiCordova might have noticed it, or Lassally, but periods of times where Johnny Carson would actually look off and be totally disinterested. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, there was more in New York. I mean, in New York, he was doing an hour and 45 minutes, and then it went down to 90 minutes, and Johnny was just exhausted. So when you got somebody that was so dull in New York, if he knew the camera was on a guest, sometimes Johnny would just look over at Peter and some of the guests and roll his eyes. And it was just really, really hard sometimes because if the chemistry is not there, there's not much you could do. But there were certain signals where Johnny knew that to throw to a commercial if it wasn't going. But there were definitely within the Tonight Show, there were stories about certain guests that was just complete train wrecks. The chemistry wasn't there, and Fred and Peter both could tell when Johnny was not into it, and it was definitely let's throw to a commercial and never have this person back.
I'm talking to Mark Malkoff, author of Love, Johnny Carson. I really recommend this book. We're talking about just the highlights. This really goes into it into detail. And I also mentioned you go back and listen to the podcast if you're interested as well. One of the things that I think you do well is it's annotated, so you could find out different people you might want to hear them talk about. What did Lassally think about Ed McMahon and Doc Severinsen?
You know, he was friendly with both of them. I mean, I think with Ed McMahon, I think that a lot of people on the Tonight Show thought Ed just had a really good gig and he lucked out. I mean, he was really, really good at what he did. He set Johnny up like no other. But I think he thought that there were maybe a bunch of people that could do that gig. I mean, Doc Severinsen easily could have been the Ed McMahon. Him and Johnny were legit friends. They would vacation together, and but I think Doc also, Peter just, Doc was so good. His work ethic was just like Johnny's. I mean, Doc would always be practicing. And I know Peter just really respected that band. I mean, they, again, demanded excellence, and they were excellent.
When you look at Lassally, and I know he's told you things like you said off the record, did he kind of rate the different people in any way, or you just say they were all the different people he worked with had different skill sets?
Arthyr Godfrey he compared to Oprah Winfrey with just the amount of influence that America just trusted this person, and the amount of influence that Godfrey had over the nation at that point in time. He just had never seen anything like that. And then in terms of talent, I mean, definitely Johnny Carson and Letterman. I mean, Peter knew Dave's talent, and I think that those were probably the top two. And, Peter told Dave Letterman when they were going to go from 12:30 to 11:30, you have to start dressing like a grown-up and wearing suits and no more khaki pants and just certain things. Dave really listened to Peter just on how to make the transition from 12:30 to 11:30. And that Peter led that. I mean, went into the meetings with CBS and, Dave basically deferred to Peter, and then Dave, when he premiered in August of 1993, I mean, it was a TV phenomenon, and Peter was right there.
Yeah, he was there, and noticeably he wasn't with the Tonight Show and with Jay Leno, but that was also another story for another day. It was kind of a really well thought out plan to try to get that show, I think, by Leno and his team. I mean, clearly they worked the system.
Definitely Jay's manager, Helen Kushnick, had Jay go to every NBC affiliate and shake hands with everyone, getting good. Yeah, there definitely was an effort to try to get the show where I know Peter and Johnny Carson wanted Dave Letterman to have it, but NBC never asked them. And Dave just didn't think, while Johnny was still behind the desk. Johnny was his hero. He's basically told people that he knew, I can't politic for this job. While Johnny is still there, and it went to Jay, obviously. But there was a New York Post. There was a fake story that was planted by Jay Leno's manager, Helen Kushnick, who later she admitted to Jay it was her. She denied it at first, that the NBC wanted Johnny gone, which was not true. And Johnny was just really, really upset with that. And I know Peter was as well. So there was definitely some tension between the two camps, unfortunately.
One last thing I want to mention, because we respect for your time, is Joan Rivers obviously was hired as a full-time guest host for a period of time. And then when it didn't end well because she was negotiating with Fox for a show and did not let Carson and his team know that she's negotiating until the very last minute. Okay. But what was interesting was she also tried to recruit Peter Lassally at the very last minute and kind of took him by surprise. Was there tension with Carson that Carson might have thought for a few moments that Lassally knew all along?
It was really bad. Joan Rivers called Peter Lassally and tried to take him to Fox. Every talent coordinator that Johnny had got a phone call and was offered double their salary to leave Johnny and go to Joan, and nobody did. And there was a brief, a period where Johnny wasn't sure who was loyal and who was going behind my back. I mean, it's complicated that Peter Lassally and the Rivers families, they would vacation together. They, at one point, were extremely close. So Johnny just wasn't sure what was going on. And then he figured out Peter had absolutely nothing to do with it. And Peter told Joan, absolutely not. I'm not going with you. And Yeah, it's a really sad story with Miss Rivers not lasting too long at Fox, under a year, and then her husband taking his life. Very, very tragic.
Yeah, that really is sad. I mean, of course, she bounced back later doing other things, but I have to believe that was probably her first love was doing those shows.
Yeah, I mean, Johnny, for the very first time in the history of the show, he selected Miss Rivers to be the permanent guest host. I mean, her visibility was unbelievable, and she broke Frank Sinatra's record residency. It was either in Atlantic City or Vegas, and I mean, she just became so in demand and making so much money just as the permanent guest host. And then, I mean, Miss Rivers' friends said, "You need to tell Johnny; he's going to be upset." Don't blindside him. Barry Diller here in New York told me, because Barry Diller was the head of Fox and played poker with Johnny. They were friends. He told me that he told Miss Rivers, "You need to tell Johnny. You need to." And she just wouldn't tell him. And when he found out, he was heartbroken. He was really, really. And then Miss Rivers reached out to him. Miss Rivers found out Johnny knew, tried to reach out, and Johnny never hung up on her. He just wouldn't take her call. There really wasn't much to say at that point. Unfortunately.
Yeah, and there were some stories that maybe her husband might have influenced her not to.
Yeah,
I guess that's hearsay.
That's there's definitely people that say that. I mean, he wanted to be an important producer and be an executive producer, which he was on Fox, and that behind the scenes, Ms. Rivers really wanted to defer to her husband in terms of business decisions, which I believe she did most of the time. And yeah, he told Miss Rivers that there would be unforeseen circumstances, and also that if Miss Rivers would have told Johnny that the guest hosting would have stopped, which is true. I mean, when people would have sat down with Johnny and said, "I have an opportunity to go up against you," Johnny would say, "You have my blessing," but he wouldn't have them guest host anymore because, you know, they were going to be his competition in a few months. So yeah, I mean, she basically didn't tell him to, so she could keep guest hosting for about, I guess, 2 more months. But that ruined the relationship, unfortunately.
Yeah, and by the way, I know you are still involved with late night television. I mean, I
Yeah.
think you kind of have made that your passion, right? Even through, I see the cone head behind you.
Oh,
One of the things.
yes. I'm doing a podcast right now for Late Nighter is wonderful. LateNighter.com is late night news, past and present. I do a podcast called Inside Late Night. And I talk to people at all the shows, from Saturday Night Live to Conan, talk to people that went on Letterman. So, yeah, the whole genre is really, really interesting, fascinating to me. I still talk to people about Carson from time to time, which I really get excited about for more tidbits of information. It's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle, a little bit, piecing everything together. But I feel like I'm very close to getting the puzzle done. In some aspects, I think it is done, but then I'll hear some things from certain people, and there's just a little bit more to it. So
we started talking about Peter Lassally. Is
yes.
there anyone else who is like Peter Lassally in today's television world? I mean, he seems like he was a unique, really an incredible career, but is there anybody like him that reminds you of him?
I mean, in terms of somebody that could recognize talent, in terms of like Peter could, in terms of a late night host, in terms of talent, I think probably Lorne Michaels has been responsible for so many people that were complete unknowns and really putting them in the spotlight, and his success rate of getting people. I mean, Peter, when he was in Cambridge, Massachusetts with his daughter looking at colleges, and he saw Stephen Wright do stand-up, Peter said, this guy, complete unknown, we have to put him on. And you know, Stephen Wright got called over to the couch. His life changed. And when he won an Academy Award, he thanked Peter, he thanked Johnny, and Stephen Wright, every single anniversary to the day that he debuted on Carson, every year would call Peter and thank him for that. But that was Peter's eye. That was Peter's talent.
That's a great way to end the interview, talking about that, because I can't imagine a greater tribute to somebody, especially in Peter's role, than to have someone like that call. It probably meant a lot to him that he had that, you know, and legitimately the guy earned the appearance. It isn't like he just put him out there. So Mark Malkoff, I want to thank you again for joining me. It was wonderful to have you back on the program. A lot of people liked the first round, so I'm sure they'll like this as well.
Thanks for having me back. It was a pleasure.
Take care. Thank you so much.
Thank you.